Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to the Heartbeat. Today we're going to be talking about episode 2 of season 1 of HBO's Westworld. Join me, will you? Now, it can be rather rewarding when a show actually comments on itself, providing both praise and critique for its characters, themes, and storylines within the context of its own narrative, and that actually occurred numerous times throughout the second episode of Westworld, titled Chestnut. Whether he realized it or not, the way that Jonathan Nolan had his characters describe the purpose and intention of their creation could actually very easily be applied to his own TV show and his worldview along with it. So when an android told newcomer William, in reference to the theme park, that figuring out how it works is half the fun, Nolan was also telling us, the audience, how we should feel about his TV show. Easy answers and simple narratives were just boring, and we should really enjoy our journey through this maze of a story. Even more than that, this week both Nolan and his characters alike seem to understand the dangers of pushing things too far, of growing, advancing, or multiplying their androids and or plot threads beyond what was wise, and in so doing actually drowning their creations in the very material that gave them life to begin with. Almost like the android that's pulled down into the white goo in every opening credits sequence. And Ford's mentioning of William of Ockham and his scientific principle, Ockham's razor, which states, entities should not be multiplied unnecessarily, or, in other words, the simplest explanation is usually the right one, was obviously in reference to he and Bernard's search to discover why their creations were malfunctioning, but it was also a principle that they, as well as Nolan, just seemed bent on ignoring as they charged Ford's, ever growing the number of advancements within their androids and multiplying the plot lines within their television show. And even as this show's strivings towards Game of Thrones size proportions does continue to make me just slightly nervous, I was encouraged on this episode to see a stronger point of view as well as a few uniting ideas and themes that did help to tie things together and focus the episode just a little more. And one of those uniting ideas was the search for answers. Bernard's search to uncover what's wrong with the androids, Ford's search to find the once white church, Dolores' search to remember what happened to all those townspeople, Maeve's search to recall her own past, William's search to discover what Westworld has to offer him, and the Man in Black's search to locate the entrance to the maze. And even while some of those searches were disconnected from the others in some ways, there was woven throughout each of them the common theme of chaos versus design. So specifically, a couple of the human characters actually articulated their belief about the real world and just how it was kind of meaningless chaos. As Ford put it, we speak the right words and create life itself, out of chaos. Or, as the Man in Black described things, the real world is just chaos. It's an accident. But in here, every detail adds up to something. Of course, this isn't the first time that Nolan has explored the idea of our world being without design and purpose and just the hopelessness that brings. A hopelessness that, in his opinion anyways, can only be combated by creating the illusion of purpose and design. And a prime example of that would be Hugh Jackman's final monologue in the film The Prestige. The world is simple, miserable, solid, all the way through. But if you can fool them, even for a second, then you can make them wonder. And you get to see something very special, the look on their faces. And it was because of that same belief that we found Ford condescending to his creation and wandering through it, searching for something new, something greater, something higher, searching for that white church. And even as that white church is just a blackened steeple, for now anyways, and even while Ford himself acknowledged that he'd strayed a bit too far from where he was supposed to be, and that he'd never be able to fully experience the magic that those within his creation could experience, because, as he put it, everything in this world is magic, except to the magician, that didn't stop him from searching. And even while he could tame the rattlesnake, which was a fun reference to the original film, and could easily find what was likely the place that the Man in Black was now headed, the place where the snake lays its eggs, Ford still longed for more. He longed for a design beyond what could be explained, more than what he himself could create, a sign that there was something more beyond the chaos. But now that I've mentioned the white church turned black, it is fun to point out all the black and white motifs that run throughout this show, which very much represent the duality on display in it, and not just between chaos and design, but also between the garish and the subtle, between people like Sizemore and Ford, Logan and William. And directly connected to that, I did find it extremely interesting that throughout this second episode, we saw Bernard dressed in a white button-up shirt anytime that he interacted with his fellow Westworld engineers and designers. But but while interacting with Dolores, we saw him dressed completely in black, which does open up a number of theories. One, that entire scene was actually happening in Dolores' head, just some sort of psychic or electric connection between her and her maker. And two, even if the scene was simply happening in a physical space, it did certainly seem that Bernard was breaking protocol, and that Dolores was absolutely onto something when she asked him, "Have you done something wrong?" For example, when Bernard was asking her if anyone had updated or altered her characteristics, it was almost as if he was testing her, ensuring that she would keep his secrets. It didn't feel coincidental at all that the camera just held on him as she said no, almost as if it wanted us to see just that glimmer of comfort that he received in that answer. And I found it interesting too that when he told Dolores, "Erase this interaction, confirm," Dolores' yes was accompanied with this look of resistance and almost resentment, as if her longing for freedom was beginning to show. It will be exciting to discover if in fact Bernard was trying to repress her in that moment, or was actually planting the seeds that will one day lead to her freedom. Part of me is beginning to believe that he's actually using her as his prophet in a way, calling down to her from on high, telling her to remember, and prompting her to forecast things like, "These violent delights have violent ends." And though obviously less direct, it did seem too that the Man in Black was being led to a very specific place this week by the creators of Westworld. And even as Lawrence's daughter said, "The maze wasn't meant for you," I couldn't help but think that that response really wasn't a warning so much as a response that was specifically designed to intrigue someone like the Man in Black. I am still very curious to discover what exactly he meant though when he said, "I was born here," because of course he didn't mean literally, being much older than 30. Sorry, Ed Harris, it's just very clear. So was it some sort of reference to coming to life in Westworld in a way that he never could in the chaos of the real world? Or was it teeing up some big reveal that he was in fact still an android, and was just one of the first to break protocol and seek out his maker? And another of the uniting themes that ran throughout this episode was that of dreams and stories. And obviously a number of characters, from Dolores to Clementine, experienced or mentioned dreams, but taking center stage here was Maeve, as her nightmares time and again brought her back to her days as a mother and as a homesteader who was viciously attacked by Indians and then scalped by the Man in Black. But even more nightmarish still was the reality that she woke up to backstage of Westworld, and I have little doubt that even as her mechanics will do their very best to fully erase that experience, some of it will remain stuck in her mechanical psyche to later be drawn upon as this world moves towards revolution. Now, while what occurred to Maeve in that lab probably wasn't by anyone's design, nearly every other one of her dreams was, from the perspective of those behind the scenes anyways, simply crafted stories. Some created by Sizemore for individuals like Logan, while others were authored by Ford for individuals like William and the Man in Black. And while on the subject of the former of those two individuals, even while I did find the way that they were written and performed to be quite over the top, there was an element of truth to their ridiculously arrogant and entitled personalities. See, I work at this place called Disneyland, which is a place that promises to be the happiest place on Earth, and kind of just, it's sort of terrifying sometimes watching the sort of people that promise turns our guests into, and having seen that time and again, it does make characters like Logan and Sizemore actually not all that ridiculous. But what makes those characters truly fascinating was their shared belief that this place is the answer to that question you've been asking yourself: who you really are. Indeed, Sizemore constructed that entire thoroughly absurd new story based upon that belief. And to go back to what we were discussing at the top of this episode, I think the purpose behind Westworld and the reason that people return to it time and again was probably my favorite shared concept between the fake world of Westworld created by Ford and the real-life television show of Westworld created by Jonathan Nolan. On one side, we had Sizemore and those studio executives or producers or writers that believed the primary reason that people returned to their amusement park or to their television show was for things like sex and violence. Fortunately, on the other side of that coin, we have people like Ford, and I think anyways, Jonathan Nolan, who believe, as Ford himself put it, the guests don't return for the obvious things we do, the garish things. They come back because of the subtlety, the details. They come back because they discover something they imagine no one else has ever noticed before, something they've fallen in love with. They're not looking for a story that tells them who they are. They already know who they are. They're here because they want to glimpse who they could be. And with that said, I must ask you guys, what subtleties have you picked up on Westworld that kind of keep you coming back week after week? Definitely comment below and let me know. There's never quite enough time on any given Heartbeat episode to discuss everything that I noticed, so I definitely need your guys' help in that regard. And speaking of help, I must give a very special shout out to a new patron of mine over on patreon.com. Brent, thank you so much for pledging your hard-earned dollars to this channel, to keep it alive, to keep me producing these video blogs, to challenge me, to encourage me. Genuinely, amidst the busyness and the couple other jobs that I hold down to support myself and my wife, you really do help to keep this thing going, so thank you. And to the rest of you guys, even if you can't pledge on patreon.com, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.